Hey, welcome to episode 4 of Bums in the Bleachers, brought to you by the Chicago Sports Bums. I'm Drammy Sosa alongside my PIC, Praz Master. How's it going, Mike?
Doing well, John. Pretty fun weekend. Actually got to see our podcasting overlord Baloney, and went out for drinks with him and a couple other peeps on Friday night. Um, I also, pretty successful series for the Cubs as well, and we'll get into that as well. But how was your weekend?
It's good. Nothing too crazy. I actually had a zoo day. If any of the parents out there have toddlers, we're members at good old Brookfield Zoo. So, by the way, that membership worth every dollar. If you're a parent and your kid loves going to the zoo, you go 1.5 times. It pretty much pays for itself. I didn't know how expensive like the zoo actually got. Tickets are
Wow.
like $30 for adults at this point, which is like just absolutely insane for a zoo. But that was pretty much it. I mean, we took my daughter to the zoo, went with the
Nice.
grandparents. So it was a pretty good weekend trying to do some stuff outside before this 100-degree weather kind of hits our way, which is,
Oh my God, I can't.
yeah,
Ugh.
it's going to be
I'm
awful.
not ready for that.
Are you a summer guy to begin with?
Yes, I am a summer guy. I did actually, when I was a kid, my parents did own a place in Chandler, Arizona, just south of Phoenix. And, we would take vacations there, even during the summer too. So used to being around in, oh, sorry, Johnny, I forgot to acknowledge. Yes, Johnny was there as well too. Shout out Johnny, shout out Baloney. Um, but yeah, I've been it's been kind of regular that like I'm used to being in like 110-degree heat like that. So are you a summer guy? Are you all about the heat, or
Not
you
at
like
all,
it
man.
cooler?
Hot take. I hate the summer. I'm like opposite of most people where I think most people get seasonal depression in the winter. I'm like the opposite. Like I can't deal with the heat. I'm a sweater, like full disclosure. I sweat a
That
ton.
same here.
So,
We'll say that.
it's I don't mind having to take multiple showers a day. It's just the convenience factor of it. So, not a big fan
Hmm.
of summer. So these weeks you'll find me pretty much indoors and AC all week. Definitely not doing anything outside.
For sure. Yeah. I mean,
What do you?
I don't know. To me, like it's just I can't stand the winter here. The winters are freaking brutal. I think
Yeah,
we all know that. I mean, if you're giving me one extreme over the other, give me with the weather we're getting on Wednesday over, it being 10, 20 below zero.
yeah. I'll say this. So in the winter, if it's anywhere from 20 degrees to 40 degrees, maybe, anywhere between that, I'm fine. I actually prefer it. My thing is like you can always like layer on, right? When it's
Yeah.
super cold, like you can always layer on. In the summer, there's only so much you could take off before it becomes indecent exposure. So um, I can deal with that. I think the sub 20, when it gets below zero, I think that's where like every year I get older, I start questioning like, why the fuck do I still live in Chicago? Why do I keep
Right.
doing this to myself? And yeah, so I mean that I guess if when you're talking about like those polar vortex winters here, yeah, absolutely not. I'm out on that. But if we're talking just 20 degrees, cold, chilly, snow, like I'm fine with that. I can deal. But what are you drinking tonight?
I got my favorite beer that I can find in the state, at least, Bell's Oberon summer beer. Classic Bell's Brewery in Kalamazoo. Shout out them.
Drinking
They're
drinking from
certain
the enemy right now.
drinking from the enemy. Yes, shoot, I didn't even think about that going into this, but they did used to sponsor the Cubs at some point. I think they sold at Wrigley, so not totally enemies.
Yeah, I actually just picked up. I was talking to Baloney pre-show. I just picked up this bottle of Beautiful and the Damned. It's a
Very
straight rye
nice.
whiskey that's actually bottled and out of it says Chicago, but I believe it's St. Charles. So
Okay.
local brand. I don't think it's heavily available in all of Illinois yet, but I picked it up from Malloy's down in Glen Ellen. So uh, really great rye whiskey, by the way. So I was just talking to Baloney, like if you're just kind of getting into like a rye and you're just like a straight bourbon drinker, it's a great introductory rye because it is a little bit more bourbon forward, some of those sweet notes, but great pour. And that's Yeah, that's what I'm doing tonight. But kind of talking about, we were talking about this earlier. We wanted to do a new segment where we talked about maybe some non-baseball things, right? Like
Hmm.
we get a little bit baseball Cubs heavy. Obviously, it's a Cub content show, but we wanted to talk through some overrated, underrated, favorite, least favorite kind of cocktails. Um,
Yep.
so I've got four. I did my homework, before the show. My overrated, underrated, favorite, and least favorite. But um,
Alrighty.
I'll start off. I'll do my overrated first.
Okay. We'll
My
switch back and
overrated.
forth on this.
Yeah, let's do that. So my overrated cocktail is actually gin and tonic for me. So not a big gin drinker, not a big fan of those like kind of piney notes. So
Yeah.
I know it's a real popular cocktail, but just not for me.
No, I'm with you on there. I'm very much not a gin guy. Spoiler alert: my least favorite cocktail on here is going to be very gin forward as well. Um, my overrated cocktail is one I actually do like, but you get a bad one and it can ruin your whole night. It feels like it's maybe the most popular cocktail ordered. I'd go with the old fashioned.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I do like them. I will order them. It's probably like the the cocktail that like if I'm not drinking beer and I'm out at a bar, I'll order the most. It just feels like there's a pretty high variance between the good ones and the bad ones, I think.
Yeah. No. Totally get that. So just jumping into your underrated, and I'll go into mine. So underrated, I went with the Paloma. So
Ooh,
for
okay.
like tequila or even with the mezcal, I'm a big fan of grapefruit. So like mixing that kind of grapefruit and tequila or mezcal, love it. Think it's a pretty underrated, cocktail because I think most people lean towards margarita when you're thinking like tequila.
For sure. Yeah, I've tried a couple. I was down in Mexico earlier this year and last year too. My brother's a big fan of those as well with the clay with the clay cup and get it all nice and dressed up. I That's a good pick. Underrated for me, keeping it simple here. Um, this may sound a little bit lame, but you know, a big one for the golfers out there. I'm going with the John Daly. The Arnold Palmer, add some vodka to it. You're living good. The sweetness of it kind of covers up the taste of the bitterness of the vodka. So give me the John Daly.
Okay, awesome. My favorite was actually your overrated. So I'm an old fashioned guy. So obviously, I'm a whiskey drinker. I love a good old fashioned, just a solid rye, some good, orange bitters in there, some brown sugar, like, a little bit of honey or, maple syrup or something like that to mix it up. So I'm going to go with old fashioned for my favorite. I think that's a pretty easy one.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. I enjoy an old fashioned myself as well. Just think that it might be a little more popular than what my favorite would be. My favorite, uh, you won't know it from my last name, but I'm half Italian myself. We're big amaretto drinkers in my family. I went with an amaretto sour. It's probably
Okay.
like the cocktail that I get the most at weddings or any sort of formal functions. Nice and sweet, nice and thick. I love amaretto sour specifically with Di Serono.
All right. I thought you were talking about women, but uh, um, I'm going to go. So my least favorite, I'm gonna go with Bloody Mary. I cannot stand Bloody Marys. It reminds me of is like when you grow up as a kid and like I don't know about you, but like growing up as a kid, anytime I was sick or I had a cold, I always had like my grandmother would always give us like tea, which I can't stand tea now. So like I hate
Hmm.
tea because of it. It's like ruined it for me. But I would always have like tomato soup or something like that, and it just I don't know if it just brings back memories of those times or whatever the case, but you could throw all the shit you want in there, bacon, little, sliders or something like that, pickles. I can't stand it, man. My least favorite cocktail.
So that's kind of my guilty pleasure cocktail, if I'm being honest. I'll order it if I'm coherent enough when I'm hungover to be out somewhere or not. You know, um, obviously it gets a little overrated with all like the garnishes and the crazy stuff from like the places you see up in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's a very tomato forward cocktail, and
yeah,
if that's not your thing,
definitely not.
you're really not going to like it.
Nope.
For my least favorite, like I said, very gin forward on this, but um, I've only ever tried it once. It was on my birthday this year, and I could not stand it. I'm going with a Negroni. It was
Okay.
like the most bitter thing I have ever tried to put down my mouth ever. I could not stand a Negroni, and I mean, I don't know if they're all supposed to be that bitter. I don't know if they're all supposed to look like liquid blood, like the one that I had did, but hard pass on Negronis for me.
I'd be right there with you if I didn't hate Bloody Marys so much. So, well, obviously we're here to talk baseball. We could definitely jump into that. I don't know if we're obviously shooting live, so we're giving live updates to the scores right now. Cubs are up 5-2. Cody
Thank you,
Bellinger
Tony.
with another RBI by Cody Bellinger after Ian Happ tripled. So finally, Ian Happ does something. But before we actually talk about the games this week, we had a kind of an up and down week. I think when it comes to, the positives and some of the negatives that we got out of this week. But, before we kind of get into that, we obviously got some really, frustrating news, upsetting news. We saw that, Stroman obviously just went to the IL, and that is a big blow for not only him and his stock going into free agency, but also the Cubs rotation, because they were already feeling pretty thin as it is, right? We don't know
Yeah.
what we're getting from Tyon, game to game. Smiley had we talked about it in the previous episode, just got relegated to the bullpen and now has to be forced back
Yep.
into the rotation because of this. But yeah, I mean, tough blow for Marcus Stroman and also just the Cubs in general. And I think the bullpen just is a benefactor of not having a rotation that can potentially go deep into games.
Yeah, it's a tough break, and I feel like this might be on me that I cursed him last time we recorded when I said that he was really only on the injured list just because they wanted to give him like a fake IL stint because he had been struggling in his last few starts. But
I don't blame you for that.
yeah, yeah, that's what we were all thinking. He
It's a
was all
different
set and
injury.
ready. Yeah, totally different injury. He was all set and ready to come back for Game 2 of that White Sox series. Then came up with some rib discomfort. Turns out he tore cartilage in his rib. That does not sound comfortable at all. I don't know. Have you had any sort of injury to that level? Because that's like that I like
Yeah,
that.
I
That's one of
mean,
those you hear it and you like get the heebie-jeebies just hearing it.
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this. So my athleticism stems to backyard, basketball or something like that. I could definitely play. I don't know. We need to set up a one-on-one against me in HBIC because he talks a big game, playing
Yes.
b-ball. But back in the day, I actually used to be pretty good. I don't know how I would fare now, but fortunately, I've never had a sports injury. Most of my injuries, especially now, come from either sneezing too hard or bending down too far to tie my shoelaces. So definitely a little bit more of an older age kind of injury. So no sports injuries, but yeah, I mean, we talked about this. It was a different injury than he went on the IL with, right? We knew
Yeah.
that he was, what did he originally go on the IL for? Was it
Believe they called it
hip?
hip inflammation. Yeah.
Yeah, hip inflammation, and then obviously torn cartilage. And I know there were some rumors going around that maybe it was not baseball related, which I don't know. I haven't heard much stories after that, but I kind of question. I wonder if it was because he's trying to ramp up. Obviously trying to heal that hip, if that really was the case, and just trying to ramp up too quickly and end up tearing something. But I mean, it by all accounts sounds like it's incredibly painful. Hearing from athletes talk through it and things like that, it's a pretty painful injury from what they say. And it's going to put him out at least 6 weeks, which, I mean, if you're doing the math on the schedule, leads us pretty much right into October, where, if
Was that confirmed that it's 6 weeks, or like is
it's
that
an,
just
So it's a
Speculation on your part.
it's a minimum. So they're saying it's a
Minimum.
minimum of 6 weeks for him. That injury typically takes about 6 weeks to heal from averages of athletes and everything like that. So
Gotcha.
that was kind of the timeline that they said it would be, maybe about 6 weeks. And again, this wasn't coming from the Cubs. This was coming from, either, beat writers or just anybody who follows sports. But just looking through, Twitter and everything like that. And just, again, based on previous athletes' injuries, about 6 weeks. But that also means that he can't do anything in those 6 weeks. So he can't even work out. He's not even going to be in
Ooh.
shape, let alone baseball shape. So looking
Oh
at the
boy.
timeline, if it is 6 weeks, that's going to lead us into October. So if we make the playoffs, that's about the time that he would have to start getting into shape before he gets into baseball shape, before he starts working out his arm again. So I don't foresee him being back this year. I don't know your thoughts on that, but I think he's pretty much done for the year. They won't say that he is, but I just can't see a world where he would be back.
I, yeah, I mean, especially with an injury that has been so up in the air so far, like it feels like it feels like the right thing to do at this point is to shut him down. It sucks because earlier this year he was such an important part of this team until he started to struggle a little bit post All-Star break. He like I feel for him the person too, because like obviously not just going through a lot of pain, he was due to make a big payday this offseason. Who knows now if maybe this possibly makes him reconsider picking up the player option with the Cubs for next season. Um, it's a possibility now because like I couldn't tell you what his market looks like at this point when he has struggled as much as he has in his last 5, 6
Yeah.
starts, and his health is now in question.
Was literally going to just say that, right? Where he, prior to, the 6 or 7 starts that set him back before he went to the IL, I mean, he looked like a stud. He looked like an ace, and he looked like a guy that,
Hmm.
maybe would age gracefully because he never really threw with like a ton of velocity. He relied on ground balls, soft contact. Um, but we saw the 6 or 7 starts that obviously diminished what he would be looking for in free agency. His ERA started to inflate. Again, put him on the IL. So I wonder what he's going to do now, because I think, to your point, I think he has to pick up that option. I don't think that he's going to go into free agency and get that multi-year deal that he's looking for. And,
Right.
he's going to be, I think he's either going to be 33 or he will be 33 next year.
Yeah.
And if he's looking for a 5-year deal, I don't think he's going to get that coming off this injury now, right? So I think he will pick up that option, be with the Cubs next year, and be in another prove it year for him, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame because like I mean, in a weird way, like it hurts the Cubs short term, but could potentially really help the Cubs long term.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, hey,
So
it is what it is at this point. They've gotten by pretty well, ever since he's had to be put on the IL. So, we'll the Cubs will find a way to piece it together. What's up, Dougie? How you doing?
yeah, so you just said piecing it together. So what does that mean for reinforcements in September? What does that look like? Because I think that we have some prospects in the minors right now ready to come up. Hopefully, maybe give us some relief in the final month of the season. Ben Brown is a guy that has been named a lot. He came in that David Robertson uh, trade with Philadelphia.
Yep.
Has done really well in the minors, has ascended from Double A, or I believe he's in Double A now, or did he get up to
He
Triple A?
no, he's up to AAA.
Okay,
He's in AAA. He's actually been there a little bit, 6-7 on the year in AAA.
okay,
Little bit of an inflated ERA, 4.85 ERA, but I mean AAA is kind of like the hitters league and everything. That's
yeah,
seems to be the level of the minors where the hitters really feast. But the one thing that I like cannot wait to see, and hopefully this does transfer to the major league level. Ks per nine, 12.5 Ks per nine on Ben Brown this season so far. Like
yeah. So
that's yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, and that's where it's like we kind of lack that as a rotation, right? That kind of true power pitching, number one or two, or whatever you're looking for, especially when you get into the playoffs, when you have to play, deep lineups. In September, October, you need those power pitchers where if they're going to get some traffic on the base pads, they can punch out guys to get out of those innings. So Ben Brown's a name. Cade Horton's another name that, gets brought up a
Hmm.
lot. He's had some pretty good success so far in the minors, and he looks pretty dominating from the strikeout perspective as well. So he's looked kind of ace-ish. I don't want to say it just yet because it's still early on, but when they drafted him, they knew that he was going to be more MLB ready sooner because he came
For
out of
sure.
college. So
Yeah.
that might be an interesting guy to bring up.
I think that, well, the difficult part of this too, and if they are determined that Stroman is out for the year, what I think, I was discussing this with a somewhat friend of the program, friend of mine, and friend of the Bums, Alex Rude, earlier today, that the he would have to go on the IL retroactive to when he originally went on the IL. That would be
Yeah.
60 days. 60 days from that point would be the day after the regular season ends. Um, I don't know if there's any chance that he could be ready come playoff time or not. But what I will say is, the best options that you have at Iowa right now are guys that are not on the 40-man roster, and transferring him over to the 60-day injured list
Yeah.
opens up a 40-man roster spot for a guy like potentially a PCA, potentially Luke Little, who looked good in his AAA debut. He went 2 innings, faced 7 batters, struck out 5 of them. He's a lefty as well too. Huge need for what something we've been stressing about ever since this podcast inception. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is probably the right call at this point. Is if they're determined that he's not going to be ready by the end of the regular season, open up that spot for someone who has the same potential as him.
Well, yeah, and I think Carter Hawkins said this week that it's a real possibility they can bring up PCA in September, and by all accounts, he just continues to rake no matter
Yes,
what class he goes up in. He raked in Class A, he went to Double A, he raked, he went to Triple A, had a tough first week, and then after that, he just took off, and he's looked like a superstar.
he even with his struggles in his first couple games in AAA, he's played 16 games in AAA so far. He's gotten on base in every game. He's currently riding a 14-game hitting streak. He has 4 home runs in 16 games. He scored 20 runs in those 16 games. Like
It's
he
insane.
is carrying the Iowa Cubs right now, and potentially could be doing the same in Chicago pretty soon.
Yeah, and I know you just mentioned it, using up those 40-man roster spots, but I know a guy that they could pretty much DFA right now and I wouldn't miss. So can you guess who that
Does
is?
his name rhyme with Schmatrick Schmizdom?
Yeah, pretty close. So let's talk about obviously this week in baseball. We predicted at the end of the Bums in the Bleacher cast last week that the Cubs would go 4-1 on their homestand, and they ended up going up 4-2. So
3-2,
you know
3-2.
3-2. I'm sorry, 3-2. So let's start with let's talk through the red line roller coaster. It didn't start out super great. The first game against the White Sox, we saw that Luis Robert home run. And before we get into that, let me ask you something. Were you upset about the Luis Robert reaction to the home run?
So I'll say this: I was there at that game,
Yeah,
and I wasn't upset at all with Luis Robert having the reaction that he did. I
yeah,
mean, I don't. He's said in some interview right around the time of that game that like he really embraces those games, and
yep.
the not since AJ Przinsky has been around has there really been that kind of like guy who's a wrestling heel on either side. I guess you could maybe say like Wilson Contreras with the bat flip in 2020, but again, that was at a time when there were no fans in the stands and like it wasn't the same sort of environment with that. No, I mean I have no problem with. I've long been pro celebrate everything, pro flip your bat, pro, tell the crowd to shut the hell up, especially when it's, two douchebag, stockbroker looking assholes from Naperville, more than likely. Yeah.
Pretty accurate. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was looking at Twitter and I saw a lot of Cubs fans, just get upset about it, just clapping back saying like, y'all are 20 something games under 500. You're acting like, you just won the World Series and things like that. I honestly didn't have a problem with it. I loved it. I didn't love that he did it against us, but if you're
Right.
talking about just baseball in general, I love when guys do that because there's not a lot of moments where baseball players really can do that. Like I think you have basketball where you have the Steph Curry where he just shoots, walks down the court, doesn't even look at it as it drains. You got the LeBron pump in the chest. I think even football, you get the celebrations, but baseball, you don't get a lot of those opportunities to really celebrate or even have moments that are that big because it is, it's such a weird sport in a lot of ways where we know it's a team game. To score runs, you have to keep the line moving. But when you're up to bat, it's just you and that bat. Your teammates are not there in the box with you. You're by yourself. So I think when you see guys that actually celebrate that and they get to like pump their chest and I think especially with Luis Robert, he is by all accounts a really quiet dude. He's not a guy that has typically been the, pump my fist, flip my bat, talk a lot of trash. Like he's quiet. He's a really quiet player. And when he did that and he did the look back at the dugout, he did a look back at the fans, he did the shush. I loved it. I thought it was funny. I didn't love it at the time when we went down.
Right.
But, looking back, I was like, I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it's fun. It's good for baseball.
Yeah. I mean, look, no Cub fan liked it at the time. I mean, look, I we'll talk about what happened the next night because, this kind of ties into it a little bit. I did maybe get into a few skirmishes on Twitter with some White Sox fans that I maybe was hanging out with on Friday night. Sometimes it happens. But I mean, look, Luis Robert's one of the best players in baseball. He's established this year that he's probably going to wind up finishing somewhere in the top 5 for MVP for even as bad as, the Sox are. Like, that was a pretty huge moment for, a crowd with a different kind of energy than what's normal, where, you have all of Chicago there and like half the crowd has, exactly, Baloney. I like to get in the mud. Half the crowd there it's by far going to be like their biggest moment of the season. And, I'm not here to tell you shouldn't celebrate it or shouldn't react the way you should to it. So, I mean, I do think it's a little weird to call it iconic, as I've seen thrown around on Twitter.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but
yeah.
Well, let's move on from that game because that game was not a fun game for us. I know you were at that game. That was a frustrating game to watch. Just we couldn't get anything going on offense. But looking at the next game, a little bit better results, even though it was incredibly frustrating leading into the 9th inning. But you did call it, and I'm gonna give you your flowers here. You called the magical revenge game, and that game does not become a winner without Magical starting it off on offense and hitting that pinch hit home run, which at that point in the season, I think Cubs batters were hitting like 222 or something like that, 220. They were hitting right about the Mendoza line. So he came in, hit a home run, really got us going. But you called it. You said magical revenge game.
Yeah. I mean, hey, he had his big moment. Sadly, we did not get the thanks White Sox call from Boog Shambi on that one.
I was disappointed. I was waiting for it. But at that point they were down.
It's funny. So. I wasn't even watching at that time. I was just getting home at the time when Magical hit that home run. I look at my phone and see that he hit the home run. My jaw damn near hit the floor. Of all the guys that was going to put the Cubs on the board when they had been getting shut out for the better part of 8 innings, like Nick Madrigal would have been the last guy you would have expected to put one in the basket, have a nice little pimp job there. Yeah, that was huge. But then the next inning, there was a slightly bigger home run that was hit.
Yeah. But before we get to that home run, though, I
Oh,
wanted to give a
you're
guy
right. You're right.
credit. I wanted to give one guy credit, which I'm about to take back because he just blew the lead right now. It's 5-5,
Oh my God.
5-5 Cubs, Tigers.
Double
Javier
agent for
Baez.
the Tigers, Michael Fulmer.
Yeah, Javier Baez hit a two-run double to make it 5-4, and then Zach McKinstry, another ex-Cub,
Jesus.
single to tie the game. So, but I
Everyone's having their revenge games here.
bad timing because I wanted to give him his flowers, but Michael Fulmer was really great in that game because they had, they had the bases loaded, no outs. The White Sox did bases loaded, no outs, and he struck out 3 in a row to get us to the next inning, which obviously led to, Bellinger getting on base, Swanson getting on base, and then obviously Morel hitting that big home run. So I wanted to give credit to Fulmer, even though again now I'm taking it back because that dude just fucked up this game.
Yeah, that was. I mean, look, it's not over yet tonight. We'll see what happens. Yeah, you know what? I mean, look, he's rebounded this season very well, and like from the time that he was closer when he was really struggling, he's found a nice little role as a middle reliever. Excuse me. Yeah, that was huge. That was a huge moment to get out of a bases loaded no out jam. In the middle of that, I think Luis Robert did Eloy was a part of that too, I want to say. So like you had like the two hitters in the Sox lineup that you fear the most and wind up, not giving up any runs from that. Like that's the sort of like thing that could spark or not could
It's
spark because we've already seen things sparked with this run that the Cubs have been on in
yeah,
lieu of in pursuit of a playoff spot. But it's going to be one of those memorable moments that we remember if they do wind up sealing the deal and getting into the playoffs.
yeah. So let me ask you this because that Morel home run was huge. I jumped off the couch at that
Yes.
point. I was already down and out. Morel had been 4-39, in his last 43 plate appearances, and I mean I think he had like 19 strikeouts of those. I think almost 20 strikeouts of the 43 plate appearances. So he had really been scuffling there for a bit. And, I was already counting him out. I was like, this motherfucker's going to strike out. This game's over.
Hmm.
They won't do anything. And, hits a deep fly to right center, takes off the jersey. He's running out I think
Yes.
he was so excited. He couldn't even believe what he had done. Which I love that kid for that reason, where it's just, he plays like a kid, he's just so excited to just play baseball and be on the field. And I think he's amazed when he does things like that. He's like a fan as well, which is really crazy to
Yes.
see. But because of that the way that they won that game, people are talking signature win, right? Or this is that the signature win of the season. But I wanted to ask you, do you think that was a signature win of the season, or would you rank the Talkman robbery against St. Louis earlier this year as higher?
It's so hard to say. That was the same game too when there was, you had Miles Michaelis throw it, Ian Happ, and
Yep.
you had the incident with Wilson Contreras there. We went over that when it happened too, and it had our fun with that at the Cardinals' expense. It's tough to say because like neither game was really the fact that like the Cardinals are bad and the White Sox are bad. It didn't really impact too much head to head. But I will say, if that Talkman home run robbery doesn't happen, we probably don't get the Christopher Morel game winning home run because that's kind of what sparked the Cubs going off and going on the 8-game win streak that they did.
Yep.
They like, yeah, we wouldn't be sitting here with Jamer Candelario on the team. We probably
Exactly.
wouldn't. We probably still wouldn't have Cody Bellinger or Marcus Stroman if he were still healthy. We wouldn't have those guys on the team right now if not for that Mike Talkman home run. So yeah, that's got to be like the signature win at this point in the season.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I think there's just so much chance there for meatheadedness where you could have a lot of guys to say like, well, I'm so glad to beat the White Sox, that I just care about beating the White Sox and, taking that series and whatever, bullshit comes with like that, if you even want to call it a rivalry. But to
It's
me,
probably
that,
it's probably the more exciting finish, I would say, but the more
yeah,
important win came from the Mike Talkman home run robbery.
yeah, I'm going to go with the Talkman robbery because that was the game that put them one game over 500. And it was the first time they were over 500 since I think April or early May at that point,
It
right?
was
Where they,
so you know what's funny about that? So they went under 500 in the home series against the Cardinals in May when Wilson Contreras came back in his first game back with the Cardinals. So it was kind of a nice little book ending of like they put us under 500, but we're getting back over 500 against them
yeah.
too.
And honestly, it always means so much more when you can beat St. Louis. And then into to win it that way in St. Louis, where everybody had to drive home just fucking pissed, because
Hmm.
they had a chance to, I mean, it was in the grass, it was in center field, clear robbery. That to me was a more important win. And like I said, they went 52 and 51 at that point. They were one game over 500 and they haven't looked back since. So
Yeah.
they got them into selling mode, like you said, and they just kind of took off from there. But, it was good to see that they actually split that series with the White Sox. We obviously, we talked about the schedule being really light with the White Sox and the Royals, and we expected them to go 4-1. They went 3-2. And again, really just playing KC was to me a really even more frustrating series because of how poorly KC has played all year. I mean, they have a worse record than the White Sox. They're one of the worst teams in the American League. Um,
I think
and
only the A's are worse.
yeah, it's only the A's, and that was a really disappointing series. And I mean, Witt just raked all over us. I mean, that dude just it was like Pete Alonso out there. We just talked
Yeah.
about it last week where Pete Alonso almost, pretty much single-handedly beat the Cubs in that series against the Mets, and this guy almost did it for the Royals.
It's kind of become like a little bit of a trend with these series recently, and we're seeing it tonight too.
Yeah,
Like they're the Cubs are facing these teams that you expect that you're going to go in there and if it's two games you're going to sweep them. If it's three, you're going to take at least two. But every opponent they've faced on those teams that you would have thought would have been pushovers do at least have one guy that you can't take too lightly, that you have to that could potentially dominate a game as uncommon as it is in baseball. And we saw it with Pete Alonso in New York. Luis Robert has had his moment in the White Sox series, but yeah, Bobby Witt Jr. Holy hell, that guy is a problem, man. Like, he was running all over us. He was hitting amazing. He made a great catch up the middle on us on Sunday, I believe. He like that kid can do it all. Uh,
yeah,
like he like there were times in yesterday's game. There was a huge moment in yesterday's game in the bottom or top of the fifth. He came up to hit with two outs, runners on second and third. Cubs were only up a run at that point. I was convinced that if the Cubs were to pitch to him, that the Royals were about to take the lead. Somehow Kyle Hendricks got out of it. Thank Christ that happened. But like, you know, just I'm glad he's not as much of a problem as he will be for the American League Central. But like, my God, like that guy is a
played well.
superstar in the making.
Yeah, played well, and only a second year too. But thankfully took 2 out of 3 from the Royals. And again, I say thankfully because I feel like they escaped with some wins there. But I wanted to ask you, just looking through the past week, you know, the Cubs actually batted pretty well for the most part. They hit 276 over the 5 game span. They had a 409 on base. They were averaging about 4 runs per game, which is about a run less than they had been doing all season. But Are you having any concerns with the offense at this point? Because not only that, it's happening against bad teams right now too, where we're seeing these guys, these starters that have really inflated ERA. Like we saw Lyles who had like a +6 ERA, and they should have, I felt they should have been hitting home runs off this guy. I think he's given up 28 home runs this year, and I think they hit one off of him.
Just
So
one, just the huge one that we didn't know it at the time from Miguel Amaya in the eighth.
yep,
Yeah, he's
Cubs.
Jordan Lyles is like a big time like innings eater. He'll have a lot of games like that where he will pitch the whole game, and at the end of the day, his stats won't look all that impressive. By the way, breaking news:
Six
Nick
five.
Madrigal again puts the Cubs on top. Let's go, baby. Um, I mean, as of right now, with how much of a strain they have on the rotation with Stroman being out, and you're not knowing exactly what you're getting from Drew Smiley. I mean, the bigger concern for me right now, I guess you could say, would be with the bullpen.
Yeah.
But I think overall, like, they gave up some runs. Julian Merriweather giving up the home run to Luis Robert. You know, it'll happen every now and then.
Yeah.
I feel like they settled into, what they. I feel like they're they're just fatigued right now. Like, if you're going to ask me what I have a more concern with is if it's the hitting or the bullpen, I'd say bullpen. But I think overall they'll wind up being okay, just because this has been a little bit of a stretch where like you're not sure what you're.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get you. And I think my thing would have been the bullpen. I just wrote it here: 5 2/3, 5 earned runs given up over the last 2 games. And then if you want to even add this game, 2 2/3 today with 3 earned runs. So you're talking about almost, seven plus innings, 7 1/3 with 8 earned runs at this point coming from the bullpen. So, and we talked about it. They might be starting to get a little bit taxed with these starters not really going as deep as we'd like them to. Assad only went 5 1/3 today. Steele only went 6 innings in his game. And granted, he only gave up 2 earned runs, but I mean, he was almost at 100 pitches going into almost the seventh at that point. So, yeah, a little bit cause for concerns. I'm hoping they can right the ship this week. Again, we continue to face a really weak schedule. They should be playing better against these teams. So hopefully, we know we got some series coming up with, again, subpar, sub 500 teams. They should be doing better. But speaking of better, let's talk about this week in Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger, by all accounts, just having a phenomenal year, right? And we talked about not just comeback player of the year, but maybe being top 10 and voting for MVP. This was his down week. He had a pretty down week this week. He had 267, still on base of 333. On base of 733 and OPS of 1.066 with 3 runs, a walk, only 3 strikeouts, 2 homers, and 5 ribbies. So if these are his down weeks the rest of the year,
right? Yeah,
I think
if you're OPSing over 1,000 and this is bad for you, yeah.
I'll take it.
I'd like to see what his good weeks look like, but and we know it very well. The thing is though that like with all the missed time he had with that injury, it's going to hurt him, but like he's not that far off of what like the National League lead for like the rate statistics would be. I mean, I did some research earlier. He's tied for 11th in the National League in WAR with 4.2 wins above replacement at this point. That was at that's like an all-star level, and that's with him missing over a month worth of time as well. It's 4th in the National League in average. I know average isn't all that great of a stat, but it's still nice to bring up and everything. He's in both slugging and OPS 5th in the National League, and like he would be on pace for probably about at a 162 game rate. I'm saying here, he'd probably be on pace for about 35 bombs and like 110 RBIs had he stayed healthy that whole time.
Yeah.
Sadly, at this point, I would say there's 2 guys in Atlanta that will for sure be
Yeah,
finishing ahead of him in Matt Olson and Ronald Acuna, and then two guys in LA in Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman that
right.
will likely be ahead of him. You know what's crazy? In doing some research earlier today, Mookie Betts is having like arguably a better year this year than he had when he won the MVP in Boston.
Yeah,
And like
just
like
plays for a great team.
he's already eclipsed those numbers, and we're not even into September yet.
Yeah, he's the victim of the byproduct of the Dodgers. Just having so much star power. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So right now, just quick update: Cubs are up 6-5. They got runners on first and third, no outs. Mike Talkman actually
Ooh,
hit a single, so it's
let's go
guys on the
Palatine
corners, no
Pounder.
outs. All right. Well, let's jump into our favorite segment: start or DFA. So
Yes,
I did my
sir.
homework today. I got it ready for you. So I'm going to jump right in. All right. So these
Okay.
are two current players from this year. Player one is batting 281 with an on base of 320, 500. Uh, I'm sorry, on base. I'm sorry, OPS and then or slug and then on
There
base
we go. Yep.
OPS of 820. Sorry, and then 24 doubles, 24 home runs, 79 RBIs, -1 defensive run save though, but still a 978 fielding percentage and a total WAR of 4.9. Player two is batting 249 with a 333 on base, 434 slug, and an OPS of 767. 19 doubles, 18 home runs, 60 RBIs, 8 plus 18 defensive runs saved, 0.988 fielding percentage, and 3.8 WAR.
Okay. So we have one guy who hits for pretty good power. Defensively, you could probably get by with him, but you have a much better defender with the other guy. But the other guy isn't that great of a hitter. Um, I mean, I feel like I'm getting set up for another like Shohei Ohtani trap here, but I I think I'm going to start player one, DFA player two. I mean, with only -1 defensive run save, I don't feel like you're getting hurt too much in the field with him. So
Okay.
let's pull back the
So
curtains and see who we got.
I'm gonna share who you designated for assignment, and you DFA'd the Chicago Cubs starting shortstop Dansby Swanson,
Oh my god.
and you started
I had a bad feeling that it was Dansby too.
and you started the guy you were just touting, Bobby Witt.
Okay, that's I will take that. Basically the younger version of Dansby Swanson at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Okay.
I mean I hate that that's who I wound up DFAing because I love Dansby Swanson. I love everything he's
Yeah.
done this season. But okay,
And to be
good to
fair,
know.
Dansby has been slumping lately. So, which honestly, I'm okay with at this point. I'm hoping he gets hot in September when we need him. We need to ride his bat. So, yeah, you just picked Bobby Witt and DFA'd Dansby Swanson. So let's go to our second one. Now, these are two players over the course of 162 games. So I know last time I did the same way. One's a retired player, one is a current player. Um, I'm not going to tell you which one is which. So I'm just going to give you the numbers over 162 game average. Player one is batting or has batted 301, 384 on base, 557 slug, 940 OPS, 28 doubles, averaging 36 home runs, 103 RBIs, a 154 weighted run plus, and then 6.51 average WAR throughout the year. So if you take total
Okay.
WAR divided by the years played, average WAR would be 6.51. Player two batted or has batted 301, 412 on base, 582 slug, 994 OPS, 34 doubles, averaged 40 home runs, averaged 102 RBIs, 170 weighted runs created plus, and then a average WAR of 6.55.
Okay.
So
So
before you give your answer, think it through and then let me know when you're ready to pick. And I want to give you one caveat.
So we got slightly better hitting numbers with player 2. I mean, this almost feels too easy. Um,
Ready to pick?
this is this is
Don't tell
also
me yet.
this is also feeling like maybe you're baiting me here with like some guy whose career didn't last as long as it maybe should have, or
Okay,
that like.
I'm gonna give you the
Go ahead.
caveat.
Okay.
Player 1 averaged 130 games over 162 game season. Player 2 averaged 114 games over 162 games season.
Okay. Your best ability is your availability. I'll give you that. I mean, the numbers are so similar that like giving me that caveat, I'll go with player 1 to start and player 2 to DFA in that point if he's available more often.
Okay. Player 2, who you DFA'd, was Mike Trout.
Oh my God.
Player 1, well, hold on. Player 1, who you started, is the great Willie Mays.
Okay. Good. I fine. Satisfied with that. Mike Trout is amazing, an all-time great player. Probably not going to be Willie Mays at the end of his career, but okay, yes, glad I picked the right choice in that one.
Yeah, so Willie Mays was player 1. So you started Bobby Witt and Willie Mays and DFA'd Dansby Swanson and Mike Trout. So I love that game.
Well,
It's fun.
it is a fun game, and well, hey, I probably got the better career in game 2. Probably got the player with maybe slightly more potential in game 1. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what it looks like over the course of this next 6-7 years with Dansby under contract with the Cubs.
Yeah. All right, let's start wrapping it up here. We've got our flying the W's and taking the L's. I kept it pretty simple this week. I only have one W, one L. I can start off with my W.
Sure,
I'm going to give my W to a guy that we have consistently shit on for not either signing free agents we want them to sign or extending guys that we want him to extend. And I'm going to give my W to Jed Hoyer for having some foresight to the Marcus Stroman contract situation where, at the time, Marcus was chirping real loud on Twitter, which he usually does. He's a very vocal guy on Twitter and social media, was clamoring for a new contract. Jed stood pat, stood quiet. And by all accounts, doesn't look like he's going to get the contract that he wanted. And again, we've shit on Jed a lot for not making certain signings all offseason. I don't know about you, but I was bitching and moaning. We need to sign one of these shortstops. We need to get Correa, or we need to get, Trey Turner or whoever it was, right? And he waited, and he got his guy. He got Dansby Swanson, which, if you're looking statistically, you're looking at overall year performance and WAR and things like that. He's having the best year out of any of those shortstops from that free agent class. Beating Xavier Bogaerts, beating Trey Turner, beating Carlos Correa. I think Trevor Story was in that mix too. And he's having the best year. So, and again, like a lot of it could be luck, a lot of it can be really did his homework. But he, by all accounts, made the right move, right? He knew not to extend Javier Baez. He knew not to extend Wilson Contreras. He knew not to extend Chris Bryant. He knew not to extend Anthony Rizzo. He knew not to extend Kyle Schwarber, which maybe is the only one I would say, along with Rizzo pre-injury, that maybe he should have signed those guys, but he gave them, Rizzo gave a fair offer, and he signed for slightly more in New York. So it wasn't even like he was that far off in what he had offered. So I'm going to give my W to Jed, man. He kind of had some good foresight. I think he's done a good job. I really hope he continues this and he goes all in on Shohei Ohtani in the offseason, and he'll really win me over, because I think I still want to see more. I want them to go out and get that bona fide superstar, the guy that's going to be the face of your franchise for like the next 10 years. And he hasn't really done that since, he hasn't done that Theo Epstein did that with John Lester, maybe, but Jed hasn't done that yet. So now that we have a little bit more of a winning culture, we've got guys coming up. Go spend the money, go get a superstar. But
Exactly.
in the meantime, sign the guys that you know that you should sign, and hold off on the guys you know you should hold off of. And he held off, and I'm going to give him my W this week.
That's a well-earned W at this point too. One other point I would probably make on Jed too is the fact that he's had the fortitude to this season cut bait with guys that like just clearly have not been working out. We just saw it a couple
Yep,
days ago with Tucker Barnhart, earlier this
absolutely.
year with Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer. So yeah,
Yep.
I can get down with a W for Jed Hoyer on that one. We definitely did have a lot of criticism for him going into not used to that baloney, huh? But yeah, definitely did have a lot of criticism for like his lack of moves, but he's he's done a solid job building this team together.
Yeah. So, what are your W or W's?
Well, I have a couple here. I'll just go with the quick ones first. W to the Cubs rotation earlier this week. 5 quality starts, 2.97 ERA, especially after the previous week in which seems like every guy was only going like 5 innings max.
Yeah.
So big ups to them. You got 2 quality starts from Kyle Hendricks, one from Justin Steele, one from Jameson Taillon, one from Javier Assad. Maybe not so much from Javier Assad tonight, but hey,
This is terrible.
no, not too bad, not too bad from Javier Assad. Christopher Morel with the big home run. He gets a W. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, Alex Rude helped me out with a little information on how the retroactive injury list things work. So shout out to Alex Rude. You get a W as well. And then my big W, my big W for this is yesterday during the White Sox and Rockies game. They started off the broadcast as normal with Jason Benetti and Steve Stone. Midway
Yeah.
through the game, Steve Stone was not there, and the final 6, 7 innings of that game were called by Jason Benetti alone, going full Vin Scully with us.
Yeah.
I went back and watched a few innings, the first few innings of that game. Steve Stone was working the first 2 innings, but you could tell in his voice that there was something wrong with him.
Yeah.
Hopefully he makes a full recovery. But came out that he has stomach-related issues. I'm not going to go too far into what that might be. Hopefully nothing Lamar Jackson adjacent. Uh, but yeah, Jason Benetti, big W for calling a game by yourself like that in a pretty difficult situation.
Yeah. Love that. All right. I only have one L. My L is going to Rob Manfred, the commissioner of MLB. And the reason why is because he still continues to employ a one Angel Hernandez. So Angel Hernandez has not umped a lot of games this year. I think he's only umpired 4 games so far this year. It should be -4.
Yeah,
Angel Hernandez should have been done years ago. He is by far one of the worst umps in all of baseball, if not the worst ump.
yeah.
But he may have broken a record, and I don't know this to be true, but I feel like this has got to be a record. He missed 22 calls in the Braves and Giants game on balls and strikes. He is now dead last out of all umpires in call rate, in correct call rate. So
Color me shocked.
Manfred is my L of the week because, again, he just continues to employ that bum. Angel Hernandez is the worst.
Yeah, that's I have some thoughts on umpire policy that we'll maybe get into on a future episode. But yeah, if Angel Hernandez, we've known for sure the absolute worst umpire ever. I mean, at least look, Joe West was bad, but at least he has a little personality to him with a country album, and making the big shoulders when he gets hit by a ball. Like he'll at least play to the crowd a little bit. So for my L's, full mea culpa here. Got to go with me for saying that Marcus Stroman would only be on the injured list because he was struggling, not because he was actually injured. Whoops, found that out the next day that was wrong.
Yep.
The second L I'm going to go with is Royals left fielder MJ Melendez. I don't know if you happen to see this, but on one of the home runs that Cody Bellinger hit on Saturday, he actually made an attempt to try to rob the home run at Wrigley Field, the only stadium in baseball where it's physically impossible to rob a home run, where there's literally a basket right above your head. You try to like scale that wall and didn't even come close to making an attempt at getting your glove up for that ball. So MJ Melendez gets an L. And then biggest L has got to be the just the most stereotypical looking Cub fans that Luis Robert clowned behind home plate that apparently were saying some unkind things to him before he went deep on that pitch.
Yep. The frat bros.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's talk through our upcoming schedule predictions to wrap up the show here. Real quick update: it is now 7-6 Cubs. Mark Leiter has given up a run. It's bottom of the ninth right now. There are 2 outs with a guy on first.
Okay.
So Javier Baez is.
How great would it be if we could just like right when this podcast ends, the Cubs win?
I hope, because Javi Baez is on deck right now. You know, I know he'd love nothing more than to stick it to the Cubs with the game-winning hit. So let's hope it doesn't get to that point. But talking through our upcoming schedule here, going to be kind of hard to predict when we obviously know there's a game happening right now. But we have 3 against Detroit here, and then we have 4 against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. So a 7-game road trip, no days off until we reconvene next week. So what do you think that the Cubs record will be now? Well, last week we were wrong by a game. I have the Cubs going 5-2. So I figure that they would take 2 of 3 from the they should take 3 from Detroit and then, or take 2 or 3 from Detroit and then take 3 out of 4 from Pittsburgh. And real quick, Cubs win 7-6, game over. So I am already.
There's one in the book.
One on the book. So I got the Cubs going 5-2 this week.
Alrighty. So there we go. We got one in the bank there. Fly the W. Tonight's game notwithstanding. So from this point going forward, you know what? I'm going to go one game better than you. I think they will go 5-1 the rest of the way because they have not had any sort of problems at all with Pittsburgh this year. I think they're going to go in there. They're going to sweep again. Maybe might have a little trouble tomorrow with Drew Smiley on the mound. I believe the Tigers are throwing there's a young pitcher they have, Tariq Skubal, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't he? Yeah. So
no, it's Olsen tomorrow for Detroit.
Okay. Did Skubal go at some point in this season?
He's going on Wednesday.
Or at some point in the series. Yeah. So maybe could have some difficulties there. But yeah, I huge that they got the win tonight. I'm saying this is, after going through 2 series where they did all right, but you would have liked a little bit more. I think this is the series, this is the road trip in which they eat up on some poor opponents.
Yeah, and they're going to need to. Milwaukee has 2 against Minnesota here. They have 3 against San Diego. So they only have 5 games here this week. They've got a couple days off in the mix where if the Cubs can win some games, they can gain some ground just by, Milwaukee being off. But we don't want to lose, ground while Milwaukee's off. So, and then Cincinnati has 3 against the Angels and then 4 against Arizona, which Arizona is also fighting for a wild card spot. So that could be an interesting series. But we are pretty much done for this episode. Before we sign off, wanted to make a quick plug to continue watching the Chicago Sports Bums at 9:00. They are going to do a fantasy football show. Next week is my draft, so I'll be tuning in and getting all the advice I can get and hopefully win my league. I'm in a whiskey league, so I'm really excited about that. So everyone's buying is a bottle of whiskey, and winner just wins some really great bottles. So
that's awesome. Speaking of some really great bottles, still go out to CD Liquors while they're still available. Get your single barrel pick.
Yep.
That our partnership with the Bourbon Bums.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for joining in. We really appreciate it and can't wait to see you on episode 5 next week.
Yes. Good night, everyone. See you next week. Go Cubs.
Go Cubs.